Hello and welcome finally to another Digital Photo Mentor photo editing live. And today we are doing animal photos. Um, as you have realized, if you've been following along, we were not able to broadcast the last couple of weeks. I had a journey last week and it got delayed due to some mechanical issues with my vehicle, but I am back now and here we are. So I want to keep it fairly short today. We got a lot of other things going on, so I want to get right into it. I'm going to welcome our usuals. Before I even go into the chat, I know I'm probably going to have some of the regulars. I already see Kelly, Stephanie, and Sheila. And AJ, oh, it looks like AJ says he can't make it. Perfect t-shirt, perfect color, she says. Yeah, I'm trying to blend in with the background, Sheila. So we thought this color looked good. I'm going to dig right in and get to the animal photos because I know you guys want to have some great tips. And we actually had some really good questions about specific things. So the first one I'm going to start with, let me go into edit mode here. And you want me in the corner like that. I apologize, Rob. I did not change the resolution on my screen, so it's not 16 by 9. As you know, we had kind of a time crunch to get in here, and I just wanted to make sure that we got in here. So the thing that I'm just going to show this one, which I did of Kelly's image, and I did this one in Lightroom, and I'll show you the quick before and after because I really didn't do a lot here. It's been cropped a little bit, and I cropped it for impact because it had some of the body and then was missing sort of the legs. So if I undo the crop, you can see the full image there. And I just felt like it was sort of weird just at the bottom of the body and having no legs. So I could take it to Photoshop AI and make some legs, but I wanted to just crop it in a little bit more. So I came in like so, and I think I ended up tilting it to get a little bit more of the body and have these lines going more straight across. So I want this sort of, I guess he's an antelope, to be in this third over here, and you'll see that his face is right on these rule of third lines. So I went with something like that. I think I cropped in a little bit tighter, actually. Yeah, something like that. Like so. And then all I did was adjusted the basics, and also I applied some masks. So to the subject, which is the antelope, Lightroom selected the antelope really well. I didn't have to do any refining. And what I did here was I just mostly zoom in a little bit. Mostly I increased the texture and the clarity and pulled the highlights down to make sure that his fur wasn't clipping. But you can see the before and after. He's just kind of spunked up a little bit. I gave him a little bit of yellow in the color tone, extra texture, and just made sure that he had detail in the white parts of the fur over here, which we're clipping before, right? So if I bring this highlights up, it affects the white parts of the fur. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure there was a little bit of clipping there, that wasn't happening. Right. So really all I did on this image was a crop and some basic adjustments here and some masking adjustments. The things I did on the background were opposite, right? So I lowered the texture, darkened it like so. And then I also added an additional mask at the bottom because I still felt that it was a little bit too light just at the bottom. So that one, I just brought the highlights and the whites down. I do think I added a vignette as well, which is under the effects panel. And that's all. Okay, so there wasn't a lot of work to be done there. But let's see if we can take that same image and copy and paste those same settings. I do a lot of copy and paste or syncing from one image to the next to save time, especially if you have similar images. Now, if this was your image, so Kelly, if you have other images of the antelope, you can do a copy. Okay, so you just do Command C, and then you get to decide which of the tools you want to copy. So in this case, I want the masking. I don't want the cropping because another image may be full frame or might be vertical or something else. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to uncheck this mask and just do the subject in the background. So the extra one that I added to darken the bottom, I'm not going to copy that one. Okay, so everything else I'm going to copy into my clipboard. Right, now if I go and look at some of the other images that have been submitted, is there anything here that might be similar where I want to enhance and sharpen the subject and darken the background? Well, I'm going to go directly up to this image of the dog, and this is AJ's image. Hopefully you'll be able to rewatch this. He said he wasn't able to come. So I'm just going to do a paste. So Command V, paste the same settings onto this image. Okay, now you see what happened is the background definitely got darker, right? If I zoom in, we can see if the dog got some additional sharpness. See his fur has been enhanced for sure, right? Now, is it perfect? No, the grass is like way green, right? But it gives us a good starting point. So from here, I can make sure that we have good detail in the black. So the question that AJ had was how to process photos of black dogs. You have to have light on them, and they have to be reflecting some light to make some sheen show up in their fur, okay? I tried to photograph black dogs in the studio once, actually, and I had to use 6 lights to get the fur to pick up the lighting, to just so that the dog was separate from the background. So black dog on a black background is tricky, right? At least here we have a lighter colored background, right? So I'm going to go in here and play with the color temperature a little bit. We can also change the camera profile. So right now it's on landscape, which we know enhances the greens. So we could try one of the others, even just neutral. Okay, look at that. The green is better. Right? Same with portrait, same with standard. Okay, so standard actually looks probably the most realistic, and the dog still has lots of punch. So I'm going to go with camera standard. Okay, then I'm going to check the white balance. So I could do that by using the sliders, or remember we've got this eyedropper. So when we know that the subject is pure white or pure black or medium gray, if you have got a gray card, you can use this eyedropper and click on it. So if I want this part of the dog to be black or neutral colored, okay, notice this little thumbnail up in the left, okay? So as I move this around on the dog, see how the thumbnail changes color? Okay, so I'm paying attention to that, and I want to get something that's neutral. So I want the dog to be warm. That's purple. That's no good. I want the dog to be warm. Right? That looks better. And the grass to be green. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go back in and check these sliders because these are the ones that were copied over. So I'm going to adjust these so I'm not having any clipping of the fur. And with black, I want to have a little bit more clipping. Okay, so I do want the darkest parts of the dog to go black. I'm also going to darken it overall. And I'm probably going to crop out this top part here. Okay, so when we're cropping, if you want to keep the same aspect ratio, you can either lock it. So that's the perspective, length to width. You can lock it, or you can just hold the shift key down while you grab the corner. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm just going to come in to get rid of all this stuff at the top. Okay, and the dog still has nice space to look into, but less junk at the top to distract you. Okay, so he's fairly well centered within the image now. To solve the green problem, I want to either lower the saturation of the greens or darken them, or both. So we're going to the HSL panel, and we can work with luminance. Now remember, grass has green, obviously, but it also has a lot of yellow, right? So see how the yellow kind of picks up the highlights? So I'm actually going to work with that. So I'm going to increase the yellow and decrease the green so we don't end up with something that looks like just a flat, blob. He's not sitting in a flat blob, okay? Be very careful when you're using these sliders that you don't go too far. So I'm going to give the yellow highlights a little bit more punch and darken the greens. And then under saturation, just lower the green a little bit. We can actually increase the yellow if we want more yellow. Hue will allow you to shift the color of the green. So if we're happy with the color of the dog, but if we find the green is too blue, we can shift it this way or this way. Okay. So if I shift it a little more towards yellow, I find that that color to me is a little more pleasing. Okay. Now I'm going to use a preset to do an edge vignette. And the one that I'm using is Edge Dark Strong. And that just applies the sliders in the effects panel, how I've predetermined them for dark. Okay. So the idea with the overall vignette is you don't want to have people go, oh, wow, you have a nice vignette, right? Now, because we've also got these masks that I copied over, right, we can work with it even further, okay? So the background here, right, we could lower the texture, which is already happening. Again, this was copied and pasted from the other image, right? I've given it some blacks. We've lowered the highlights. We've darkened, okay? So we can just tweak it a little bit like so. And then on the subject, okay, let's see what the subject is doing. It's definitely bringing out some highlights. It's adding yellow, which I'm not actually that crazy about. Maybe I'll just give it a little bit of yellow. And we'll go even more with the texture. Okay, so see how as I increase this texture slider, watch the amount of fur that's visible on the face. Okay, so lower texture, increase texture. So texture slider does a better job, in my opinion, of enhancing fur than the clarity. If you go to clarity, it gives you more of an edge contrast. Okay, so I would probably do a combination of both, but clarity can go overboard really quickly. So I'm going to go about like that. Let's try that. Okay, so see how we're minimizing the background and punching out the detail in the dog. I might even crop a little tighter, actually. And I'll show you another little quick trick here. So in the background, what we're doing right now is we are darkening it, and we lowered the texture a little bit. But let's say I want to blur the background from here backwards. So from where the dog's back is backwards, okay? So I want to do more blur. So I'm going to do another mask and select the background again. But I don't want the foreground, okay? So this is where add and subtract comes into play. Okay, so I'm going to subtract linear gradient, and I'm just going to drag a gradient like this, and you can see it starts applying, right? So wherever I've dragged it from, my new mask is going to apply back here only, right? And it's not affecting the dog because we chose background only, okay? So I'm going to start from there, and I'm going to take the clarity down a little bit. I'm going to take the texture a long ways down, and I'm going to take the sharpness down. And if we want to go a little further, we can try dehaze. I find that dehaze does a nice job of making things blurry, but it lightens everything. I find that if you do that, you have to bring back some black and then just darken the whole thing. Okay. We could even lower the saturation. So let's see what that's doing. See how that's lowering the sharpness only on this back area. Okay. So it's kind of like bokeh blur in Luminar, but we're just creating it with a combination mask. Okay. So once again, now that I've done all my edits, I'm just going to go back and check that I've got some highlights. Do I need to increase that a little bit? Do I want some more shadows in the dog's fur? And so on. Okay. So there's our before and after. I think the grass is actually too dark. So I'm going to dial it back just a little bit. That looks good. So the dog still stands out, and the grass is a secondary background. Right? Once again, we have another dog image. This one is in the water, though. Okay, so the HSO might not apply, but let's do another copy. And I'm going to use this mask this time. I'm going to rename it. Okay, so whenever you do a mask that you might be copying, I'm going to say background blur. Okay. Give it a name so that when you go to do copy like this, you have an idea of what it is. Right? So I'm copying that. I'm going to paste it onto this same image. Okay, so it should find the dog because we've chosen subject and background. Okay, indeed it did. Now we need to brighten up the whole thing. And let's just do that. So there we go. And it's really sort of red. So that's a lot of magenta in here. Let's get rid of some of that. And do color more like that. So the water was kind of an odd color. And we can actually come back to that. I'm going to edit for the dog. And then we'll come back to the water in a minute. So I'm trying to look for what color is the dog. What color do I want him to be? Okay, so now he's really yellowish and the background is really yellow. So let's go with something somewhere in the middle. Let's try that. Okay. And let's look at our masks. Right. I think it's getting his tail as part of the background. Oh, no, it did. It did a good job. Okay, so background, subject. It's still doing a good job of adding texture. And then the background blur. Okay, now on this one, we could actually go back to background. If we want to shift the color a little bit, I can choose, let me just turn off the overlay. I can choose a blue. Okay, so now we can actually put him into some blue water as opposed to having him swimming in some muck. That's a little too much. Okay, something like that maybe. Oh, that's better. There we go. So now he looks like he's in blue water as opposed to brown water. Okay. We can bring the highlights down on the water a little bit more. Right. Now this one is bringing the texture down, but let's leave the texture at 0. So this first one is lowering the brightness, okay, this background, and the background blur one is what's lowering again from here back. Okay, so we can still adjust where we want that blur to start and how I want it to fade. Okay? So I want to blur it from there back. Something like that. And we could take a look at our HSL. Maybe we just need to reset these. Right? This yellow bit in here, right? I could even lower the yellow saturation. Okay, so see there's a lot of yellow in the water, right? So I could lower the yellow saturation, or I can even shift it a little bit. Let's see, that goes green. That's kind of a weird color. Okay, so let's look at the before and after. The dog is still a little bit dark, okay? So we can either brighten him by brightening the image overall, like so, or we can go back to the subject and brighten him a little bit here. Okay, making sure that I'm not clipping anything on the highlights and that I'm still keeping some black. Like so. Another before and after. Okay, so the key to editing black dogs is to make sure that, let me just come back on the screen here. So the key to editing black dogs or black horses or black animals in general, because we have an image of a bear as well, that this same technique would work on, is to make sure that the highlights stand out. Okay, so make sure that the whites are increased, because where that light is skimming the fur, that's going to be the highlights, and that's how you get texture in the fur. You have to have those highlights nice and crisp. So don't get rid of the highlights thinking you need to have it be a dark or a black animal. Keep the highlights, increase the texture slider. Okay, so that's going to help bring out the fur. So let's do that. Let's see how that applies to the bear. Right. So once again, I'm going to do a copy, Now this one might go weird because I've made the background blue, remember? Right? And where's the bear? Bear's up here. So we might just have to do some editing on the background. So let me do a paste. So we're going to end up with a blue background, right? But it's actually not that bad. Okay. So what happens there is the bear is now brighter and more yellow. Okay. I wonder if this is high ISO. It looks a little bit grainy. 5,000 ISO. Okay. So this one is a little bit grainy. Shot at, 5,000 ISO. So we may have to deal with some of the grain as well. Let me just turn that off. But the before and after, see how the foreground was really bright? So we've darkened that down, right? And I'm curious to see if it thought the log was part of the background. It did. Okay. So now we've got the background here, which is blue. So we can get rid of the blue. And let's say we want the background. Now it's back to neutral. Do we want it more orange? I actually didn't mind it being a little bit blue, right? Because when you have your subject that's warm and the background is more blue, the subject will stand out a little bit better. Okay, so that's not entirely a bad thing. And then this other one with the background blur, once again, we're blurring from here, like so. So we're blurring the background part. And if I don't want that log to blur, all I need to do is subtract. And I'll do subtract object. I'm just going to draw a box around it. And it will not select that pole. Okay, so now I've got this part. Okay, I'm using the O key. Rob, if you could please share, this is Deb's bear photo. If you could please share the link to the Lightroom keyboard shortcuts. So I'm using the O key to show the overlay color, right, which is this green here. So I can see where my mask is applying, right? So background suggested everything or selected everything. Then I did the linear gradient, which deselected because I did minus, subtract from this foreground up. So it's this thing right here. Okay, so it's never going to select the bear. Okay, but this foreground was part of the background selection. And when I drag it up, okay, now it's masking that. And then I just did minus object. Okay, so whatever I do now, and I'll just show you how drastic I can be. I can darken this right down. Okay, so whatever I do is applying to those areas. Okay, now you can see it's missed a spot here. So if I wanted to get all that dark, I would just go add those to the background. Okay. I'm just going to bring the highlights down. We've already got sharpness and clarity down, and so on. Okay, so there's the original. That's what we're doing so far. But we're not done yet. I still want to work on the bear. Okay, so let's come back to the bear. He's selected as the subject. Right? I'm going to do some denoise overall, but he needs some noise reduction. Okay, I don't know if you could see from here, but he's fairly noisy. Right? So I'm going to do a little bit of noise reduction here. And whenever you do noise reduction, you end up losing some sharpness and detail. So it's kind of that balance again. You need to increase your sharpness a little bit, increase the noise reduction, and do that little dance. Right? I'm also going to lower the shadows because I don't want to take the shadows away so much. So remember I said we want to keep the highlights on our little bear. Keep the highlights. We need to have some black. Yes, we do. And if anything, I might give them a bit more contrast. Highlights on that nose. So his nose is really bright, but I don't want to lose the highlights on the fur. So I'm going to do the nose separately. We also have a slight sharpness issue because it looks like the pole is sharper than the bear. So we could try and sharpen him up a little bit. All right, so next I'm going to add one more mask, and I'm just going to do a radial gradient over his nose here and lower the highlights. See what that's doing? And the color of his nose is a little brown. There we go. Okay, so here we have before and after. I still want to darken that foreground and these sticks over here. So one more mask. Actually, I could try it with the HSL. Let's go to HSL. And I'm going to go to Luminance and lower the yellow. So see that yellow is in the foreground. Let's see about green. A little bit of green. Okay, so I'm actually going to lower green a lot and yellow a little bit. Something like that. If we do orange, it's going to affect the bear's nose, so we got to be careful there. Okay. So that looks okay. And if we're still not happy, then we can do another mask and just do a quick linear gradient. I do these a lot on the edges of things, and I'll just take the exposure and the highlights down just so that we're darkening this part here. As for these sticks, I've showed this in previous videos. The sticks grab attention, right? When we look at this image upside down, if we look at just the bear, where is your eye going? Okay, so remember the four things that draw your attention? What's drawing your attention here? Right? Do I need to put the banner on the screen? What are the four things grabbing your attention? Okay, of those four things, which is the brightest thing in the image? It could be these sticks, right? Where's the most sharpness and color? The tree actually is sharpest. And right now it's got the most intense color. So my eye is going to the tree, right? And finally, where's the most contrast? Now we're getting into the bear's face because his nose is bright and he's dark, right? So we want to get rid of these areas of contrast, and I'll show you how to do that real quick. All right, so these sticks are problematic because they're bright and they're grabbing attention from contrast. So I would use the cloning tool. I'll use healing, and I'm just going to lower the opacity to about 60 for now. And all I'm going to do is just get a brush that is slightly bigger and just draw all the way down the stick. Okay? And this does not have to be perfect, this technique. Okay, so it's going to choose another spot. So I'm going to put it here. And I might even just go to stamp instead. Okay, so when you're dealing with this, all it's doing is taking from one area, the source, to the destination. And as long as I'm choosing an area that's darker, it's literally just pulling density and putting it over top. Okay, so that, see how that's working fairly well. If I use clone instead, let's see if it blends. It blends a little better. Okay, so then I'm going to do this one. Same thing. And I may end up putting it in the same area as well. Okay. There's my, there it is. Okay, so I don't want to clone one stick into the other stick. So I'm going to use that same dark area. Okay. And is it dark enough? Right, so remember, if we go all the way, it should disappear, the stick, for the most part. Looks like I didn't paint all that well. Lightroom has been extremely slow these days, I have noticed. Like I can't even see the outline of my cloning tool right now. Ooh, he kind of looks good in black and white. That was kind of an accident, but he kind of looks good in black and white. And I might do another clone to get rid of something of that stick. Okay, but you can see what the clone tool is doing to help bring the bear out. Right? he's a dark subject lost in a dark scene. You want to make sure that he doesn't completely get lost. You could run this one through the new noise tool. So noise reduction with AI, the result will be saved as a new DNG. It does take a little while, but if we want to see, let's zoom in. Okay, so that's 200%, where you can see the grain, right? I can do some noise reduction in using the basic tools, right? And I can do some masking and sharpening. Let's sharpen him a little better. But let's try the Lightroom denoise. Let's see how it does. I think it does take a while. Got myself a large coffee because I was falling asleep today. Actually, Rob got it for me. Okay, so you can see it's doing its thing. 2 minutes. All right. So for those of you that are using Luminar and saying that Luminar takes a long time, can you see that on the screen? It says it's going to take 2 minutes. Have I missed anything? That's what you wanted, right? Bigger. All right. Let's see if I missed anything. I'm going to go back here, talking about the weather. Very nice. The dog pops. Let's see. So they were talking about the lens focal length on the bear, I'm assuming here, and he said only 500 millimeters, not 1,000. But depending on her camera, I have to see what camera she's using, Rob. If she's using a crop sensor, it basically is 1,000. Right? He was just across the road. As long as he stays across the road. We've seen videos of people, going into Banff Park and they see a bear and they get out and they want to take a picture with their phone and then they're like doing selfies. So the bear's behind them. Craziness. But the sad part is that if the bear attacks anybody, the bear gets put down. And it was the people that were stupid, right? Hey, David. Debbie's bear, yes. Manfred. All right. Click is all you get. We'll take that, David. Thank you so much. Yeah, you don't have to smash it. All right, let's see how our thing is doing. So it still says estimated time 2 minutes. Okay, so that's if I press the button. So if I move this around, you can see it's doing a preview, but look at how blurry it's getting, right? So if I do this denoise, it's literally blurring the image. Let's see the stick here, the wood, because the wood thing, the tree, is the part that's in focus, right? So let's not go quite so high with the denoise. I don't know why it's not allowing me raw details. But let's try something like that. So I'm just going to click enhance and let it do its thing. And we're going to go work on something in Luminar because we haven't done that yet. Okay, question. Could you use spot metering to take a photo of a dark animal? Yes, but you really need to know how to use spot metering, because on a black animal like this, if you put your spot meter on it, you need to then underexpose a stop and a half, because what your meter is telling you is to make the bear gray, medium gray. So the meter is always metering to give you medium gray, but the subject is not gray. So therefore you need to either adjust under or over based on the subject. Okay, so if you're photographing a polar bear on the snow, you need to increase a stop and a half. You're photographing a black bear in the forest like this, you need to decrease a stop and a half. Okay, so you can't just spot meter and go. You need to adjust from there using exposure compensation. So in this case, if you had used average meter reading, it probably would have done a good job, because most everything is fairly dark here and you would have gotten a balanced exposure. So honestly, spot metering is one that I recommend staying away from unless you consider yourself a metering and photography expert. And even after 35 years, I don't use spot metering. I just don't find it convenient, and I find it more work. I would rather use average and adjust accordingly if I find that it's not working well. There, I got to his question. And the bear did look good in black and white. So we can come back to that. So you can see it's doing progress here, right? So it's creating a DNG, and it's going to give us a new file that we can then compare. I have the voice in my head here. It's not doing it. There we go. All right. I don't know why it's jumping around. Okay, let's go back to, won't let me out of here. It will not let me out. No, I'm stuck. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now let's do something in Luminar. So we've got another black dog. And this one had some focus issues. So there was a couple of questions about focus issues and how to deal with that. There's our bear. So this one here, right, you can see that his nose is sharp, or his nose is not sharp, and the sharpness sort of is in the middle here. This eye is sharp, and this one isn't. So the shallow depth of field used here by, is it Mickey? Mickey. 3.2, aperture 3.2 is what's giving that, okay? The other one, which was sent in by Earl, is a different focus problem, and this one looks like it's just out of focus, right? So there's not a lot of detail here. Some around the snake's head, but it's also high ISO. So the thing is, when you go, Rob, if you could please look for an article about auto ISO and not being afraid of high ISO, just ones where I talk about that. Because when you increase the ISO and you're shooting in the dark, if you have a dark scenario, that's the best way to go. But what happens is you lose contrast, you lose sharpness. And if you haven't gotten the subject tack sharp in the first place, you sort of end up with a noisy, blurry mess, which is kind of what, is happening here, right? There's lots of stuff that's out of focus. So we're going to try this one in Luminar and see how it does. But let's go back and see how our bear came out. Okay, so here's the bear, and let's do a comparison. So to do compare mode in Lightroom, I pressed C on the keyboard, and that's compare mode. Okay, so now we're in compare mode. Here's the original, and this is the one that has the noise reduction. So as we zoom in, you can see that there's definitely less noise, but it's not as sharp. Okay, so you've lost a lot of detail here. So I'm still on the fence about Lightroom's noise reduction, right? It's okay, but we could run this one through Topaz probably and get a better result and keep it sharper. Might do an experiment on that one another time, but Topaz Sharpen and Topaz Denoise do a great job. And also the new tools in Luminar work well. The Denoise, I'm not a big fan of super sharp, but let's see how those work on one of these other images. So let's take the dog, and I'm just going to do, I want to edit him in, where are we? Export, where's my export? There we go. I want to edit him in Luminar Neo from the source file, meaning the raw file. Okay, so I'm not going to go edit in. I'm going export, and then I'm going export, open source file, and I'm under the Luminar Neo. That's also how you get to HDR merge and focus stacking if you have your images in Lightroom and you want to use Luminar to do your HDR, for example. I actually have a few that I shot last week that I want to do some comparisons on, directly comparing Lightroom's HDR to Luminar's HDR. Okay, so this one will take the raw file in and without any editing. So I'm just going to go straight into Luminar. And there we are. All right. So I would do this one differently because we've got some background problems here, right? So this one, I might actually do a background removal and put something simple on the background, right? Get rid of some of this stuff. So we could try erase. And there was actually a lot of new features announced today by Skylum for Luminar Neo coming up. And background generative AI is one of them. Generative fill. So it's going to be trying to catch up with Photoshop in that regard. I will be making a video shortly. I don't have my hands on the beta right now. I was away and I didn't get a copy. So I'm working on getting a copy, and I'm going to make a video for you in the next day or two. So wait for that and check that out when it comes out. But I think that would be great for removing some of these things. For now, what I want to do is just a basic edit on this guy. Right, so I want to do a develop. Let's see if we have any. Oh, he looks good in black and white too. He's a handsome fellow, isn't he? He must be a pit bull. I really like pit bulls. They have a really they have a nice character. I do like that landscape. Gives me a bit. Look at that. The camera landscape gives us more contrast. So I'm going to go with that one. And I'm still looking at my histogram, of course. So there's lots of white. So what does this histogram tell us? You can see it here with the curves. There's lots of stuff that's black. There's very little in the middle. And then there's lots of stuff that's light. Looks about right. Okay, so people would look at that and say, well, that's a bad exposure. It's not really. Okay, there's nothing you could have done photographing this scene unless you had added flash to light the dog. Okay, so there's nothing you can do here to solve that in camera. So we could lower the highlights, and I just turned the clipping warnings on. We could bring the shadows up so I have a little more detail on the dog. And then I want to make sure that I've got some black, so I got a nice rich black. And if I clip the background, I'm not so worried about it. So maybe I'll let the highlights just go where they will. Okay? I'm going to actually increase the exposure a little bit because I want to make sure I've got detail on this side of the dog. Okay. His color, we could actually warm him up a little bit because I think he's a brindle. I think that's the kind of color they call it, and he should be more brown. Look at what that does to his eyes too. Right. So if he looks kind of blue, when you're not sure what color something is, look at the highlights. Okay. So don't look at the actual subject. Look at the highlights. And can you see how? Let me go back to how it was shot. It looks fairly neutral here, but try going this way, right? Look at how much warmer, just going up a little bit and the color comes out, okay? So play with the white balance. Also, if something looks cool, take the magenta down because they kind of work opposite ways. If something feels blue, it's probably got magenta as well. Add a little bit of sharpness here. And we'll just make sure that we don't have any chromatic aberration and some defringe. Okay, so now once we've done the basic develop, he's looking good. I want to go do some structure and detail. Okay, so if we want to sharpen him, we can do details and do small details. So I'm just going to bring this up high to show you what it does. It does a great job, right? Now look at his nose, right? His nose looks out of focus, but if we drag these small details up, it kind of gives the resemblance of sharpness, right? Let's see what medium details does. Let's go with this one, right? That gives a nice job sort of on this area fur here. So I'm going to take medium details up quite high, and then small details about there. Right? And if we want to, we can mask it off the rest of his body, which is kind of falling out of focus, right? So I'm going to mask it, and I'm going to do an erase. And I'm just going to remove it from all of these areas down here, right? Because we know that this part is out of focus, so I don't necessarily need to sharpen it. I'm not worried about the background because I'm going to get rid of it anyways. Even his ear back here, right? So I've lowered the strength a little bit. And so I don't need to sharpen his ear like so, because I'm trying to sharpen the edge of something that's blurry. So let's see a before. Doesn't he look sharper? Way sharper. And if I feel like it's affecting that area too much, I can just do a minus little, this area, lower it a little bit by erasing at a lower opacity. Right? So I affect the areas that I want. Like so. Right, now I could use the clone tool or the background eraser to get rid of some of these things. I did like him in black and white though. Let's see what he looks like in black and white. Kind of a handsome fellow, isn't he? Well, I prefer color, so I'm going to keep them in color. Let's do a background removal then. So I'm going to go to masking, background removal. Right, so it may or may not find him as a subject. This part is kind of hit and miss. And I was working with Holly, actually. Holly's not here this week, surprisingly. And Mickey says that it is an American pit bull and a neighbor's dog. That's my experience of pit bulls. I think they're great dogs. And they usually smile. They have a great smile. Okay, so look, it's found the subject fairly well. Okay, so I'm going to remove it. And then we just have to resolve a few things. So once you hit remove, it gives you these refinement brush tools down the bottom here. And this is where a lot of people get confused as to, okay, how do I use these tools? So object, you can see is orange, right? And if you paint, it will paint orange. And that is telling the program, this is part of the subject or the object, right? So anywhere you paint with orange, the program is going to recognize that as part of the subject, okay? So I want to do that. I'm just going to go closer to the edge. You do not have to be perfect, right? Now notice that it picked up this little loop in his collar here. So I actually want to get rid of that. I'm actually just going to tell it, and now we're painting with blue. So background is blue. Let me get a smaller brush. So I'm just going to paint over this loop and tell it, no, I want you to make that part of the background. Or I'm telling it, no, it is part of the background, okay? So whether or not it is the background, we can actually hide it. And you can do that with people with kind of crazy hair as well, okay? So if we do a before and after, see there's something that's not quite smooth along here as well. So I can actually use this background tool to my advantage to try and smooth this area out. See that? So there's a leash or something going down the side of his back here. So I'm just saying all of that is background. Then the transition tool is what you use to tell the program this is the area of transition, and you want to sort of straddle. So when you paint along the edge, have your brush half on the subject, half on the background. And then you just paint along the edge. It paints with gray, okay? It paints with gray. Now we may end up getting that thing back again. And it's looking for the edge. Okay? Now it's kind of made this part transparent. So I want to make sure that this is object. So I'm telling that that's object. But it'll refine the edge of the image better. Okay? So if I go along just touching the edge here, I'll get rid of some of the excess background. Okay? It's just perfecting the edge. And you don't have to do the whole thing at once. Do a little bit at a time. And then if it reveals or makes part of the object transparent, right, like you can kind of see through it here, just do a paint along the edge, and then it will find the edge again, and it pops into the edge. But just in looking here, if you want to see how you're doing, just close the refinement brush. So don't exit the properties yet, right? So you can see how the color blend there is actually pretty good. I could probably go a little further and tell it that that part is the background as well. So let me go there and say, okay, that's background, and see what it does with that. Okay, so now we have just a nice smooth area. Okay. And this area up here, I'm not sure if that's something behind him, but I could smooth that out by telling it it's background. Okay. Let's just tell it this whole thing is background. And then I might just have to redefine the edge. Transition, right in the middle. Okay, so now we've refined that and we got rid of that blob up there. Okay, so there's only one little green thing over here, and I'm going to worry about that in another way. I'm just going to tell it background is here. And transition is here. Like so. So if it keeps losing the edge, again, we're just going to refine it, redefine it. So every time you paint with these tools, it's telling the program where the edge is. Okay, so now I'm happy with that. I'm just going to apply it. So now it has cut the dog out, and we can apply another background. Okay. Just go into my layers. Let's see, what do I have that it's appropriate? I've got something of grass. We could just apply a texture. Where might he be sitting? He could be sitting on a couch. Let's actually try the grass. So what I will do is add this as a new layer, and it's going to go on top of him, right? And then we just drag it behind. So we just have to reorder the layers. And this little green bit might disappear. There's a couple of things you need to watch out for when you're changing the background or when you are layering like this. Come on, catch up with me. I've got so many programs open. My computer gets tired. So when you are filling a background, notice how his ears are out of focus and the body's out of focus. So you want to make sure that anything you put in the background is also out of focus. Okay, because his face is sharp, the body is blurring. You want to make sure that it blends because the background would also be blurring. Okay, I managed to stick Luminar. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now you can see what's happened. It's added the grass. Oops. Where is it? It's thinking about adding the grass. Let me see. Are there any other questions? There's the grass. Okay, so now I'm just going to zoom back. So you can see that it's applied the grass right behind him or on top of him. And if I increase the opacity, the dog disappears. So all we need to do is take this grass layer and just drag it below the dog layer. Okay, so now he appears. When you do that, okay, because he had white background around him, you can see where we missed a little bit up here. So I could go back and refine using the transition tool around his ears a little bit, right? But the background is too sharp, okay? So I can edit this layer separately, right? And I can make it into a portrait that fits him a little better. I can also make this larger. Let me see if I move this up. I'm trying to make this bigger, and I've told Luminar developers that we need a way to make stuff bigger. Okay, so I want the blur from the background to start more closer to him. Okay, so something like that. So we can blur this background. I can use minus structure. Okay, I can use minus details. Like so. So we're blurring it. And then, of course, I want to turn down the color and the brightness. So we're going to darken it. And a little bit less saturation. It's not the best ever background, right? But it's better than what was there. I'm just trying to find something that we could use here as a background. We could also just do something like a studio background or even one of these sort of light leaks. Let's see. Let's see if there's a light leak. These come with Luminar. Let's see if we add something like this. Okay, so again, it's going to be on top of the dog. So if we want it under, we got to put it under. I'm just going to hide the grass. Right. You can still see my edge of the ears is not great. But now we're giving him sort of a, you know, showmanship looking background. That's kind of cool, right? And I can just go back here and refine the masking on the hair. Okay. So we just have to do remove again. And now we're back to editing where we left off. And all I'm going to do is just do, I'm just going to go around the edge and see if I can't get rid of that glow. We're getting closer. Okay, so just a little bit of refinement. Looks like I need to do that here as well. And around here to get rid of the white. Closer. Okay, so you get the idea. Now we've made sort of more of a portrait of him. I just need to refine the edge of the masking a little bit more. So I would spend more time to do that and zoom in a little bit closer. In the essence of time doing these edits, I kind of go a little quicker. Let's see. You like this one as a featured image? Turn down magenta photos of you. Why is that? You're too pink? All dogs are great dogs. All cats are great cats. Thanks, Mickey. Yeah, I think this is a really cool dog. I like his look. The lighting is really nice on him, right? So you've got some nice texture, and using the details tools that I use to sharpen him up does a great job. You notice that I didn't use super sharp. I find that the super sharp AI tool doesn't do such a great job, in my opinion. So, I mean, we can try it, but here, let me go back here. I'm just going to, we're just going to undo these here. I'm going to put small details back. So let's see if we can remember that. 3656. Somebody remember that. 3656. So I've turned off details and I'm going to run super sharp. Right? I'm just going to run it on low and see what super sharp does. I still think they need to do more work on this tool. It's not where it needs to be yet. And it's a bit hit and miss. Some things it works great on and some things not so great. I actually have a cat sleeping next to me. Here. Can you guys see her? There she is over there. Luminar is still doing its thing. Let's see. There's Munch. So what are we doing next week, Rob? We were going to do, I've forgotten all about, yes, she's a great supervisor, Kelly. She supervises so well that sometimes she has to come up on the desk and check what I'm typing and check my papers. Yeah. She is El Jefe. No, she'd be the Jefa. What are we doing next week, guys? I know we said we were going to do, okay, I do not know what my thing is saying. Oh, I see. Rob says he's too cool. Turn down the magenta. Ha ha ha. Very funny. Are we doing gardens next week? Is that it? Did we say gardens? I think we did. All right, let me get back over here. Luminar is still trying to think about super sharp. So this is another reason why I don't use it, because we did forest, Stephanie. We were going to do flowers. Yeah, I think we just said gardens in general because flowers could fit in the garden, but also vegetables. So we did say gardens. We set two topics. We set two topics and then all hell broke loose. And stuff happened. So I do not know what is happening with this one. I'm going to see if I can close it. No, it is not running at all. So I would stick with details. Okay, what numbers did I have, guys? Do you remember? Was it 36 and 56? Is that what I had? That sounds right. Right? I'm just going to apply this. I'm going to do minus this layer. We'll just hide these layers. Come on. I want to send it back to Lightroom. Okay, we're going to send it back like this. Come on, buddy. Come on. You know what? I'm just going to cancel out because I want to go back to grab another image. And I don't need to save this one. Okay. Let's see what else we got. Because we got a couple of forest creatures. As like we had with the antelope. So they kind of go along with forest as well. We've also got this one, which was kind of interesting because it's monochrome. So we kind of got this cow in this field. I'm going to guess this is India because cows get to sit wherever they want in India. Some cool light here. Oh, we were going to do the snake, right? We were going to do the snake. Okay, let's do the snake. All right, so let's take this same one. And is it a raw file? I forget. Yes. Okay, so CR2. So raw file, we're going to take this one to Luminar Neo. And let's see what we can do for sharpening. You wanted that saved for a featured image for the clip. Oh, well, I'll have to redo it. I will have to redo it, or you'll have to take a screenshot. Okay, so sharpening. You know what? This is giving me actually an idea for some presets for Luminar. Here's a question for you guys. Maybe you can stick up a poll or do something here, Rob. But question for you guys is, what kind of presets are you looking for that you can't currently find in the Skylum marketplace? I'm working on some black and white ones, actually. I got to get back to that. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, geez, I wish there was a preset that I could just click on to say, sharpen my image and have it, pre-apply some of these things. And then you could just tweak it, right? And of course, you can make your own to do that, right? So I could go ahead and do that right now and show you how to do that. So let's try super sharp. It's fairly blurry, so let's try middle. And I'm using the universal. So there's universal, and I can't remember what the other one is right now. Yeah, I'm not sure what you would ask in a poll. Maybe just yes, no. Would you use a preset that did basic things like punch the sharpness, punch the color, and so on? Or are you looking for, there, 2 questions. Would you use basic presets that do basic things, or are you only want presets to do creative things? What do you like? How many options can you put in a poll? Basic, creative, or both? Or neither? How many can you put? I'm working on the black and whites, Kelly. I'm working on those. I started before I got involved in doing something else. I forget, and I lost track. My accounting. Did you get a poll, Rob? Sorry, I'm just sucking down caramel coffee here. See, this is why I don't use this one. Poll is up. Interestingly enough, I don't get to see the poll. Tell me the response. I might have to cancel this one too. Yeah, it does not. This is why I don't use super sharp. Okay, so back to details. So it doesn't even recognize this one as a raw file. Let me undo that. Oh, there we go. Okay, get rid of that. Okay, now we can do develop raw. So develop raw. The first thing I would do on this one is increase the blacks because there's no black here. So I'm going to do that by pulling this over on the curve. I've got the clipping warnings on, I think. And let's give it a little more black. Jeez, how much black? Nothing is happening. My computer is stuck. Oh, there we go. Okay, so adding some black. So notice how the color comes out, right? It looks all faded. So when you add black, you're adding contrast. Contrast helps with the appearance of sharpness, right? So that's good. And we're going to add a little bit of sharpness here. And let's just see where we're at on the white scale. I don't want to go too far on the brightness because that yellow is going to clip too easily. All right, something like that. So we're going to start with that. We're going to make sure there's no chromatic aberration and defringing. And then we're going to go deal with the sharpness. Okay, and is it noisy? Yes, it's noisy as well. So again, once you're dealing with noise and sharpness, you have to be careful because if you do too much noise reduction, you blur the image. So I'm going to go back to details. Let's do that medium details again. See how that brings out, like, take a look in here. Can you see what's happening when I do medium details? Right? It's bringing out the scales. See what happens when I do small details? Small details is going to bring out more details, but also more grain, right? So I have to be careful on that one, okay? Let's do large details. Oh, that works too, okay? And I'm also going to go into structure and see if that works too. So we're going to sharpen and keep the masking up high. So I want to sharpen fairly high and aggressively. So let's see that the before. That's definitely working, right? That's helping. Now let's do structure and see if structure works. And so structure doesn't do as much for sharpening and it does more noise, right? See what it's doing? It's kind of more like clarity and I don't use it as much, especially not over here. Okay, so probably not using this one. So not much we can do here. We could actually bring this back to Lightroom and see if Topaz does a better job. But I found lately that Topaz doesn't do a great job on things like this either. The issue is that the head is fairly sharp and the body falls out of focus. And, you know, we're getting some decent detail in here, but you're never going to get it fully back because we've lost the detail. It just wasn't sharp. So I'm going to try noise reduction on here. So what's the answer for our poll, Rob? Do they want basic presets? Do they want creative presets or both? Okay, so you can definitely see it's doing noise reduction up here, right? If I go to the next one, I'm afraid it's going to get rid of all those details. Yeah, so next one takes rid of all the noise, but it's taking the detail away on the snake. So what I might do is just mask this one, right? And erase it off of our little snake. I think he's quite beautiful. People don't like snakes. I actually like snakes. Do I like venomous snakes? No, and I do not want to be bitten by one. But if I had a choice of seeing a harmless garter snake, for example, which is indigenous to Alberta, if I had the choice between seeing a harmless garter snake and a spider, I'll take the snake any day. Okay, so who answered something else on the poll? What is the something else that you want? So not basic edits. Not creative, but something else. What do you want that's something else? Tell me. Okay, so now we've applied noiseless on the rest of the image. See, it does look sharper. So look at the original image. The fact that it looks like it's probably shot through glass, maybe in an aquarium or something. So there's some glare issues and there's a lack of contrast. So just punching up the contrast makes it look sharper. Then using those detail sliders, right, makes it look sharper again. I used to do tricks when I was doing retouching by hand where I would just darken the outlines of things. And that's kind of what we've done here, you know, with the detail slider and with clarity or texture in Lightroom. You're making the dark parts darker and it gives the appearance of sharpness, right? David said something else means not interested in new presets. Okay. So maybe we should have said none of the above then, right? None of the above. That's maybe a poll to ask our overall Luminar users as well from our course. That's a good question. Hang on to those that poll. I'm going to save this guy. Let's do a vignette on here. That looks pretty good. Let's filler it. And I feel like this image was actually photographed. I feel like that's the ground, right? I feel like this is the ground that he's sitting on. So I keep looking at that going, it feels weird. Does that look more normal? I think that's the way it goes because he's sitting on the ground here, right? Snake would, that looks more normal to me. Now that I'm seeing that, I want to crop it. Oops. I want to crop transposed. I want to crop it free. So get rid of all that stuff at the top. Maybe not so much. Come on. All right, let's try this again. Ratio free. Just going to come down to there. There we go. Yeah, that one looks odd with him sideways. That looks better, I think. I'm going to save that. Take him back into Lightroom. All right, what's our verdict here? David says, I'm guessing that's huge Luminar Neo user. Every time I edit, I want to dig into your course that I've already purchased, just haven't had the time. Isn't that always the case? Okay, so now we're back in Lightroom. Do you guys agree this is the right direction for this image? It feels like it should be this way, right? And then he's coming at us. They were talking about, on a local radio station, they were talking about a lady that found a snake in her toilet in Arizona. And I called in because they were looking for stories of things that had surprised you. And I called in and I told them about how we lived in Nicaragua for 10 weeks. And we had bats in the ceiling, and I had I had a scorpion in the bathroom out by the beach, and one fella had a frog in the toilet. But I've also seen hissing cockroaches in Singapore. Those ones, you step on them and they don't die. They stand up and they go at you. So anyways, the bat thing, people were freaked out by the fact that we had bats and ants living in Rob's laptop. Oh yeah, you did have ants in your laptop. That's right. And all of this on my head is mosquito bites. We've got a mosquito epidemic in Edmonton right now. Okay, so here, let me just show you the difference here. We've got 3 different images. Okay, so the middle one is the original raw file, and this one is what was provided by the person who submitted it, this is what they came up with, and that's my edit. Okay, so be very careful. The one thing about this is that they've pulled down all the highlights and made the background and everything look really muddy. So you want to darken, but you still need to have some highlights, right? See how that's darkened and the snake stands out, but not muddy looking. And I do think this is the proper rotation for him. All right. My snake, I had a snake once. He was a little red and orange snake, and his name was Elvis. And I think at some point we found out that Elvis was a girl, but that's okay. So I think we're going to actually call it a night for today. We've done a few Luminar tricks. We've done a few Lightroom tricks. We did some copy and paste. We talked about fur. And I've still got lots more images and animals that we can work on. Marty sent one. We've got some moose and an elk and some other funky critters. We've got this little guy that Brandon photographed. We've got Sheila's horse, which is lovely. Some foxes. So we've got some North American animals, as well as we've got some Asian animals. So I recognize these guys, right? This is India. I'm wondering where that is. That looks like maybe Cuba, actually. And then some African safaris. I actually use the tools in Luminar Neo to remove these sticks. So I'm interested to see when this new generative version comes out for Luminar, which is very soon, if I'll be able to do a better job with the sticks than I can do in Photoshop. So it'll be an interesting comparison. And that is Karen's image. So I might even ask Karen if she'd let me use that for display purposes or demonstration. So yeah, so that's it for today. I'm gonna leave you with the happy dog. Who doesn't like a happy dog going for a swim? And oh, Trista, it was Cuba, so I nailed that one. So I'm gonna leave you with that. And next week we are doing gardens, guaranteed, 100% gardens. All right. So we'll see you. What's this? On the 22nd. No, what's today? 23rd. I don't even know what my day is anymore. We'll see you on the 23rd. Same time, same place, gardens. Take care, everyone.